All right, Mayor, we're on.
Calling to order the council meeting of May 24th, 2023. Please call the roll.
Mr. Knoll? Ms. Zatra?
Here.
Ms. Weltman?
Here.
Mr. Daga?
Here.
Mr. Lemay? Mr. Gentili?
Here.
Dr. Long?
Here.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to our lovely audience who's come to join us tonight. Glad you could all be here. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first agenda item this evening relates to asking for a resolution asking, we're going to skip that for the moment. We're going to get through these other items. Declaring an emergency. We'll get to resolution 2023-04 in a minute. First, we're going to do the motion to approve the bid of TC Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $158,300 for the city's 2023 concrete program. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Don, you want to take us through that?
Yes, we only had one bidder on the concrete program. Their price was higher than what we would like to see, but they're a good contractor. And our plan is to limit the work to whatever we have budgeted and not spend that entire amount.
Okay.
And we'll address the most important pieces and anything that comes up in an emergency so that we have a contractor in place to do those items.
Okay. Good job. Any questions from me?
Any particular reason what happened, Don, that we had only one bid?
It's the cement, the Portland cement and concrete in general, the market's kind of gone a little crazy, and I think guys are having trouble getting product. And so they're very cautious about their bidding, and they're just kind of picking and choosing their projects because they don't know if they're going to get enough concrete to do all the work that they're bidding on.
And Mono, to your question, we don't have any streets that we're specifically doing a complete street in concrete where we could be locked in. These are really concrete repairs. So
As needed basis.
right, so it'll be between Don and I in the service department. We'll go around and just hit key spots and make sure we stay within budget.
And so that's the ceiling of the contract. We may or may not use it.
Right, and Don and I have talked on how we're gonna handle it, and we'll make sure that it's not gonna go over budget.
Has that been our method in past years, just kind of targeting areas, or are we strictly doing that
In past
because of?
years, we've done a full street in concrete,
Okay.
plus concrete repairs. A good example would be Brainerd Road going into Orange. We did certain slabs that were bad at that time. That is what we're gonna look at, what was it, Eaton area?
Eaton Estates a little bit, and then we have some
did
other-
certain slabs that were bad within that development. That is the concept that we're gonna choose to do, because these are just repairs.
So I have a question also. So I saw the asphalt variance was also, I know we're getting to that in a bit, was pretty high. Do you have a feel for what this, it wasn't as clear what this variance from expectation was?
Oh, on the concrete
concrete.
program, our estimate was 115,000,
Mm-hmm.
and this came in at 158.
Okay, so,
We had some cushion in there, but the prices have really spiked just really in the past month or two, and I think a lot of it is really that availability of product. So if they're not sure if they're going to get it, they're being more cautious about bidding it, and they're kind of limiting how much they're bidding. So
Well, and Don, like you and I also talked, Northeast Regional's doing a mega dig where they're building a huge tunnel for their runoff to let it go out slowly. And they're taking also a lot of the concrete.
and that's a multi-year project, I'm assuming. correct?
that's big, and then ODOT's got some big demands, and those big customers always are first
They're
at the
first.
right getting.
So the variances are actually pretty comparable, which is interesting. I mean, percentage wise.
Yeah, actually, the the asphalt program, the difference over the estimate was not significant. It was pretty small in percentage wise.
Okay, any other questions? All right, could we have a roll call, please, on the motion to approve the bid?
Ms. Zatra,
Yes.
Ms. Whitman,
Yes.
Mr. Daga,
Yes,
Mr. Gentili.
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
All right, next, we request a motion to approve the bid of Geauga Highway.
Difficult to hear back there. I'm sorry.
I'll try to speak up. Microphones are on. Next, we're dealing with a motion or requesting a motion to approve the bid of Geauga Highway Company in the amount of $830,000, $188 for the asphalt program. Can we have a motion, please?
so moved.
Second?
Don, you want to take us through what that is?
Similar, we actually had a number of bidders on this. The prices were pretty competitive. We did have a couple of alternate items that we may use a portion of those. I'm recommending that we include them in the award so that we have the flexibility to use those if needed. Once we mill off the pavement, there might be some additional repairs and things that we need to do. So I think it's a good number. I'm confident that in terms of the spend, we'll come in under that 830 number, but it's about where we budgeted the
Yeah,
program. And so
we
that's,
will be within budget on the asphalt. Later on in the year, we'll be coming back for another asphalt program, and that's obviously gonna be for Shaker. But we haven't bid that out yet because we want to be able to tell the contractor the exact timing and when they can do the project.
Okay, any other questions?
My question is, asphalt to concrete roads in the city, or do we have more concrete based or more asphalt? Like as far as mileage, Don?
percentage,
Just out of curiosity.
it's probably slightly more asphalt streets. There are some concrete streets that have an asphalt surface, like the top couple of inches is asphalt,
Okay.
along with streets that are the wearing surface is concrete. It's a mix. I would say there's slightly more asphalt streets than concrete.
Okay.
Anything else? Not hearing anything. Can we have a roll call, please, to approve the motion?
Ms. Zatra,
Yes.
Ms. Whitman,
Yes.
Mr. Daga,
Yes,
Mr. Gentili.
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now let's swing back to Resolution 2023-04, which is on for second reading tonight. Council, this relates to the proposal submitted last week for approval of the city's participation in an ODNR grant Nature Works program. This relates to the concept of installing as an addition to our small playground facility in the back of City Hall, a 30-foot diameter splash pad. Basically, it's a piece of gym equipment that squirts water out of the ground. There were a number of questions that council raised last week that the team here at City Hall worked very hard to try to secure answers for you. That has been distributed to you before the meeting, and I believe actually the audience has it too. And Joe, I'm going to ask you to take us through this.
Thank you, Mayor. Based on the questions last week that council had, we attempted to answer all the various questions. I know, Melanie, you had a question about Sourcewell. An early email went out. Sourcewell, any charges that Sourcewell has to do it is paid by the vendor. It's not paid for, it's not a markup to the various communities.
It's built in.
Yeah, it's built in.
You're still paying for it.
And then we answered the various questions. We called numerous communities and in the surrounding area, and overwhelmingly, every one of them was excited that they built a splash pad. I know Emmy had a question about Lyndhurst. Why is it fenced in? Why do they charge? Well, it's part of a bigger complex. It's like, say, Disney World. Disney doesn't charge to ride the Dumbo ride, but they charge to get into the park. That's the same thing at Lyndhurst. They got a swimming pool there, so it was naturally fenced in. When they had the swimming pool, they put a splash pad in, but they charge to get into the whole entire complex. From last week's questions, a lot of the questions that came up are questions that we certainly could work through. What we're looking to do is basically get roughly 50%, if not slightly more, to put in a splash pad. So what we're asking for is the concept of putting this splash pad that obviously for the youth of the community and the younger families, they would utilize. If council is so inclined on, because a lot of the questions came up on the soft surface versus a brushed concrete. That's something that we could incorporate in, but that's probably another $60,000 to $85,000 ad. If we want to put in like a spongy type surface, the communities that we talked to, most of them have the brushed concrete. One of the communities had a painted concrete and they had somebody slip on the painted concrete. And they immediately took that out and put in a brushed concrete, which gave it a more of a, like a rougher finish. And as far as the injuries, because that was one of the questions that came up, nobody said anything more than stub toes. And even Hudson said that they wish they would have built a bigger splash pad, but since they didn't, they're looking to put in the second splash pad at Hudson. So I'm here to answer any questions. I've got John, our working foreman, here to answer any questions that anybody might have. I know last week Steve was quoting revised code about the potential injury and stuff like that. So we're here to answer any questions that anybody might have. But what we're looking for is to apply for the grant. And in talking with Don, and this is the type of grant from ODNR that there are some communities that have extremely tight budgets. So they might be looking for $150,000 to do a splash pad. And they only get $50,000, meaning they have to cover that additional $100,000 if they want to do it. There is no harm or foul to turn down a grant because they only got $50,000
In this program.
in this program. In other program, it's different. It gets more hairy if you accept the grant, then turn it down. But the fact that you turn it down because it's not what you asked for, and in this case, we're asking for $150,000, it does not hurt us going forward on any other type of grant in this program. So the ask tonight for city council is it okay if we apply for the grant? And if there's any little nuances, we certainly could work them out within the next year. And we're here to answer any questions anybody has.
So, Joe, let me make sure I understood what you just said. If we apply for the grant for 150,000, they award 150,000, and then we decide we don't want it, there's no negative consequences to that?
No, there wouldn't be any negative consequences to that.
Okay. But if we accepted it and then changed our minds, then.
Right, well then, yeah, that's where it gets hairy. That is sort of what Mayfield did with their grant way back when. That is sort of what Moreland Hills did with their Northeast Regional Grant for sewers, and then they turned it down after they had accepted it. That's a case where you'll probably never get another grant opportunity from them.
Okay. Then the other question I had is, I'm still not clear on the role or the authority of Sourcewell as opposed to the state contracts? Because it wasn't really.
It's just another name for, it's a conglomerate that does all the bidding detail from all the vendors, but it's not specific necessarily to the state of Ohio.
But
This
is,
is across the country.
right, I understand. Is it authorized by the state of Ohio?
Yes,
Is there-
it's recognized. I don't know if it's authorized, but it's recognized as a mechanism that you could be part of. We've done it before for other equipment that we bought from service.
Okay, the state program is a state program, so it's clearly authorized and sanctioned by the state. What is unclear to me is what the authority and sanctioning of this program is. It's a buying.
Consortium. I
Yeah,
guess.
Sourcewell is out of Minnesota. They're the equivalent of the Ohio Department of Administrative Services bidding program. So it's like Minnesota's program, except they qualify bidders and bids for national products. And it's a common source for municipal purchases from all over the state or all over the country. And your code permits you to participate in buying consortiums like this one. Your
Pike code?
Yes, Pepper Pike code permits it.
I think the question isn't whether we're allowed to, it's the question is we are choosing to use Sourcewell and hopeful that we are getting the best price because they are a buying consortium, although there are others. And the question really wasn't what is Sourcewell? It was easy to figure out or understand what Sourcewell was. The question is, are we actually getting the right price? It's easier, certainly, but are we getting the best price when we use Sourcewell? And have we compared it in real time in the past couple of years? Do we know what other communities use Sourcewell? Do they use the state of Ohio or another consortium? Because while we are not charged directly, the charge is incorporated in what we pay. We aren't getting it for free. They're not doing it. They're making money off of it.
Raindrop is authorized through Sourcewell, and a lot of the communities have used Raindrop. So that's who we went to. But we're not prohibited of bidding it out, and applying for this grant does not prohibit us from going out on our own to bid for the product.
I mean, the question applied beyond this grant. I understand that.
Yeah.
The question applied just in general, are we?
And we've
Is
got
that
many
most
months that if
efficiently?
we want to go out separately, we could end up doing that.
Yeah, as I understand the question and your point is that Sourcewell satisfies because the competitive bidding process that is required for the city to undertake, so that it simplifies that advertising and going, preparation of RFP and that preparation to receive competitive bids. There's nothing, and it's appropriate. It does that if there are other significant buying conglomerates like Sourcewell, for us to seek, bids from them also. I agree with you. Just like when we look at a Sourcewell pricing, we are at the same time looking at state contract bids, to Tony's point, and we are making those comparisons. I don't know how many conglomerates we've actually engaged with other than Sourcewell because they are so predominant. But there's no issue with our sourcing other buying conglomerates to see if they have better or more competitive pricing
And
than.
that was really the
than
question,
Sourcewell.
whether
That's
we were
what I
making the
understood.
correct fiscal choice in this and other projects by using Sourcewell, and had we looked into that. So that was really the question.
Well, and I
We
understand.
needed a source to at least come up with numbers to be able to present to council. We are confident that Sourcewell, no different than the state purchasing group, provides significant savings on equipment and for this type of equipment for the splash pad. So we use them to get the prices, but we are not prohibited for going out for a bid on our own and comparing it to what Sourcewell's price are.
Have we done that?
No, because
We are
why
not
would we
doing
do that unless we know we're gonna be buying the product?
Well, just
Number
in
one.
general, I meant.
And number two, this would be a project that we'd be budgeting for next year. So no, we wouldn't be doing that for this year. But with the authority to go out to get the grant, we certainly could gear up to do something like that. That's
guess-
not an issue.
Question Melanie asking, have we compared Sourcewell prices on any other purchases to know if that's the best price? I guess that's the question.
That's the
Yes.
real question, the more global
On the
question.
splash pad, no.
No,
And-
on any other product.
Other projects.
On any other
You know-
product over the years that we have purchased from Sourcewell.
We have compared, I can't remember, we bought, there used to be, Sourcewell became the new name of, and I don't know, John, if you-
NJPA.
NGPA. And we have compared that in the past on equipment that we have bought. We compared the state product that they have to other projects. And like, we can buy a pickup for $32,000 with it loaded how we want it. The average public pays close to $45,000 or $50,000 because they do their due diligence, like the mayor just said, with the bidding, the vetting, and they know, like Steve just said, they're out of Minneapolis, but they open up nationwide. They're going to get a huge volume, and their price naturally comes down because of that.
We are not wed, though, to Sourcewell or any other buying conglomerate. And there are,
And we would.
I can recall when we've bought, I believe it was police vehicles. We've gone to dealerships and seen, will you beat the state bid price? And they all say, no, that's the number. That's the best number you're going to see.
They don't want
They don't wanna get into that
irritate
fight.
The state.
Right.
Right, because next year when they bid, they're going to have a black ball, right?
Right. So the long answer to your question is yes, we look at other things.
We certainly could go out and do that.
And I think Joe's point is, in the context of this request tonight, we're not requesting any sort of authorization to purchase this particular equipment. This equipment and the information we received about it was to give a reference point for us to even understand how much does this stuff cost. Give us, so we know what is the amount of the grant application that we're trying to do. And that's really the sole purpose that it exists at this point. If council wishes to go ahead with the idea of adding this attribute to the playground area, then we'll get into what you're talking about, which would be a more,
And really the reason I asked that
granular
question is
investigation.
because I think we should periodically be doing that and not just relying on the fact that we think Sourcewell is a good resource.
I agree, and we were planning on looking at that.
Okay.
I know at least through the state program, they frown upon that because they take pride in trying to get the ultimate best cost. And they don't like if communities would deviate and not go with the state program. But we've looked. And to the mayor's point, they can't beat it. And we will look again.
Yeah, and I don't think they should frown upon it. They should be proud that they'll be the best then.
Well, what
At
they
the end of
should,
the
and
day, they should be proud that
Right.
you confirmed what they told you. So I don't know why they would.
They're
Around
private,
that.
they're a private company, as I understand it. So,
right.
I mean,
Right.
so
Dr. Wong, you have your hand up. What is it?
So how did the idea of the splash park come about again? Because when I was walking around going house to house campaigning, I didn't hear one single resident talk about a splash park. So do we really know? I mean, you referred to the survey and you thought about it last year before the survey went out. And this grant has been given for the last, 28 years or something. There wasn't a particular ask about a splash park, just a community pool and aquatic center, which got 6.9% or 54 answers in the survey, which you referred to last week. That was the initiative for presenting this grant proposal 2 weeks before it was due. So there's other things like street lighting, community recreation center, leaf pickup. That's what I did here when I went door to door. So why is it that we're picking the splash park? And we know that grant money isn't free money. And if you go through the cities on here, none of them received the ODNR grant. One of them received the Kiwanis grant. So we really have to think about, is this something we want to do? And not because there's a grant out there.
No,
we can apply
absolutely,
for.
absolutely. I
So I
totally
think we
agree
need
with
a
you.
comprehensive plan first before we say, oh yeah, apply for this grant. And yeah, we'll think about it later. I think we should table it for another year.
Well, let me answer your question, because it's a fair
We
enough
should get
question.
out of
Let me
the-
answer your question, Dr. Wong, okay?
Sure.
You asked where to come from. The idea of a splash pad has been something that crossed, my horizon by staff suggesting it, probably going back to when I took office 12 years ago. People at periodically said, how can we improve our park? Because that's always been the question. How do we improve our park, make it more of accessible and enjoyable for the residents? And it was through that kind of conversation that we have a bathroom out there. There wasn't a community survey about, do we need a bathroom? We didn't hold town halls, do we need a bathroom? It was a general feeling of, that would improve the park. How did we end up with a pavilion? There was a conversation administratively of what would improve the park. And the thought was, a lot of parks have pavilions, places where people can get out of the sun. You can have picnic tables, you can have events. We didn't have a survey. We didn't have committees. It was the role of your city government to say, how can we make that park better? And we said, let's build a pavilion. We came to council, brought it up, council supported it. We made a grant for a pavilion. How did we get a fireplace in the pavilion? Same routine. There wasn't a survey. There wasn't a groundswell of people throughout the city saying, damn, I wish we had a fireplace in that pavilion. Instead, administratively, we looked at it and said, how can we improve that pavilion? And we said, we can put a fireplace in there. Came to council, talked about the spend. It was supported. We put in a fireplace. This is what city government does. That is the responsibility of council to make these evaluations. The splash park is the same thing. It was the same conversation when we improved the antiquated, rusting playground we had out there. It was recognized by your service department that this needs replacing. We evaluated it. We looked at what would be a good alternative. This grant was available for that playground. We went before council and said, this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to apply for this grant and improve the playground. And that was approved by council, and we approved the playground. There was not a survey of the city to improve the playground. There was not a town meeting about it. It was a decision that the council responsibly made. What we're talking about here tonight is essentially an addition to that playground. It is a piece of, like I said in my earlier comments, somewhat facetiously, but actually truthfully, it's a piece of playground equipment that squirts water out of the ground. And it's intended for the same children who use our playground to have something else to do when they're out there. That's all it is. I thought council had very good questions last week about it. They were legitimate questions. And in the end, the cost to the city, if the grant were 150 and our cost, as Mr. Brzezinski talked about last week, was 125 to 150, this addition costs less than a truck. Every time we buy a truck, we don't have a committee. We don't have a survey. We don't have a town hall meeting. Council evaluates as the representatives of the city. Are we going to have this improvement to the park? Just like all these other things that occurred out in that park. And it's my feeling, when it came up A year ago, as we talked about last year, it was late on the grant. So we let it slide. It went fallow for a year. This year, we're going to come out with it to you earlier, but we have the survey going, the latest survey. And it was, well, let's see if the survey even mentions water features, aquatics, anything like that for the city. So we waited. It's on me. Don't blame these good people on our staff. I decided, okay, it's all right. We can wait till see what the survey results come. All of a sudden, it was bumping into when this grant application needs to be submitted. Apologies for that. But fortunately, it is out there. You had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions. Staff worked very hard the last week and diligently to provide these answers to the questions. I think the question before council tonight is not that there aren't other things, Dr. Long, that we can do. We can do street lights in the city. I don't think we should do street lights all over this city myself. I like our dark skies personally. If you want street lights all over, then you can bring it up at council and we can have a discussion about it. I prefer not to have street lights more so than we do. But the idea of this project, this limited 125 to 150,000 spend project, which is less than 1% of our capital reserve, less than 1% of the capital reserve. Certainly it's affordable by the city. I think the only decision that council needs to make tonight, because we haven't decided what splash pad, the question is, or from whom to get it. The question is, should we have a splash pad? That's a simple question. If council supports the idea of improving our children's park, that area of the park for the children to have a splash pad, then you should vote yes tonight. If you feel, no, you don't want to do that, that's your decision and that's okay. But that's what's before us tonight. And it's not that hard a question to answer. It's either yes, you do, or no, you don't. And I think if you have more questions about the program so that you'll understand, do you even want a splash pad? I think that's a very legitimate conversation we ought to be having. But I think we have a lot of conversation tonight still to have
Yeah, so
regarding sidewalks, and I think we ought to
I'd
get.
like.
I don't
I'd
want
like
to
have a
gloss over.
comment. Yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
I don't want to gloss over what this
What's it?
project is. And I have to say thank you to our staff for compiling the information that they shared with us about it. Okay, what I have to say is the improvements that we've made to Pepper Pike Park over the past couple decades have been invaluable. It has turned that piece of land into a wonderful asset for our community. It is so nice to see our community members engaging together at that very special spot. What I am concerned with is the opportunity costs of this project. We are taking really what's our last piece of vacant land in that area, and we're going to tie it down with a splash pad that has a limited season and really kind of change the character of that playground equipment. If you said to me, oh, I found some really great, I'm gonna refer to the splash pad as wet play, and our playground area and stuff is dry play. If you said to me, I have some really great ideas for some dry play areas there, we want to add on to this. Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I'm just wondering if a water feature is going to be completely out of place there. And then we can't use that land for anything else. I think about the Pepper Pike Ice Cream Social or movies in the park and the way that we're able to use that space to move around and like we can put the bubble guy or our petting zoo or stuff there. Once we put in the splash pad, it's tied down. It limits the use there. That is my concern. I also think that maybe we need to look at other assets that are available to our community. And I'll say it again, we have an outdoor pool that's available to residents that also includes, it is true, that also includes a splash feature. It's behind the high school. It is available to any resident here that you can go and use it. We're not without water play areas. If a splash pad were to be in conjunction with a pool area, I don't think that I would be as concerned with it. I just don't know that it's the right fit for that spot. So,
And I would just like to echo what Ms. Zatrock said. I do believe that we are, as a council, committed to making sure we have a really nice park. And I too would have easily approved new playground equipment, thought it was a great idea, a new surface. And when those things come due, perhaps if we need more lighting, for example, in that park, not to light it up, but that sort of thing. And I very much appreciate the hard work that happened in putting together many of these projects, including the bathrooms, which perhaps we might want to extend the season of and winterize. But I don't know that I see this particular project as an improvement. And one of my concerns is that council had virtually no input in what project was selected. We live in this community. I live in this community. I have 3 children now grown, but I would have liked to have weighed in on what project we had chosen. And while it is not that much money, it is still the community's money. And this is an unenclosed water park that animals and anybody could walk into. It requires a significant amount of annual maintenance. And I'm just not sure that our process was good. I think if we would have had some impact earlier on, we would have come up perhaps with a better project. And I do see it as using a big piece of space. This is a rather large, to me, piece of space. It's about 30 feet, which means that its impact extends beyond that. And that is my concern, that council wasn't asked, do you think this would be the right project for our community or for our children? And yes, I also have concerns about how we bid projects. I think it's part of our due diligence. I have no concern that we're not doing a good job, but I just think it's part of council's and the city's due diligence to periodically check on whether, our sourcing is the best sourcing. So.
Okay, well, I appreciate both your comments. And let me just say that this is the meeting where we're asking council, do you think this is a good project? That's what this is. We are making that ask. And if you don't think it is, then you should vote no and say, no, you don't think it's a good project. That's what this is. But to Emmy's point about, and your point too, Melanie, about the utilization of the space, we did talk about that internally. Sure. And those were questions that I posed to the team as to how will this affect the setup for ice cream social in the park, those things. And the team looked at it and historically where things set up. And it was their feeling that this does not negatively impact it. And more so, this is as opposed to expanding the playground and putting up hard structure, if you would. This can simply be turned off. During one of those events, it's other than the nozzle areas where there's some little piece of equipment or whatever, the surface is dry when you turn it off. And as we talked about last week, it will be turned off much of the time so that we're losing the space for other things, because it doesn't have large physical structures on it, and it can be turned off. So I think they're good questions that you pose and concerns, and you may have a different conclusion about it, which I respect, but we did address those things and thought about them and came out on the other side of where you're talking about, that it actually, I hadn't really thought about it in terms of hard structure as opposed to wet structures.
yeah, wet versus dry.
But wet or dry, but it's actually remains more usable with this sort of use. And we actually have this is a 30-foot section adjacent to the playground. We have a very large section of the park to the east of the playground, that is basically just open land. We have the whole park beyond the typical where people use it, where we put the pony rides. That's just parkland that we've never touched. We've never gone back there and done anything with that land.
Well, we have a creek that runs next
No,
to
but
there
there's
right now.
things that can be done. We've talked about, are there things that can be done with that land to make it more utilizable as, park for
And
people?
Mayor, if I may, we've talked also with Don in the past. That creek that runs through there, we've talked about potentially piping that in and taking out that scrub brush that's along there to expand the park. We looked at this and in talking with the various communities, Melanie, to your point, it's a very low maintenance solution. It's not a high maintenance solution. Every one of the people that we talk to in the various communities, it's a low maintenance solution to utilize to do a splash pad, which is another reason why we looked at it. And we also looked at it because it's one of the number one things that communities across this country are doing in their communities.
Well, but to be fair, it's still $60,000+ a year minimum to maintain it, not including staff time. And also, it's mostly the,
60,000, it's,
there was,
I thought it was like 15,000.
It was-
16 to 60,000.
It was either
depending on
16 or
the
60.
water.
60, I never heard 60,000.
No.
It was,
it was in one of the
It's in the
Depending on the
document.
water. if
That
you
is if
use
we
fresh
ran
water.
the,
versus
water out, and we're not looking at that, we're looking at a reclamation.
Oh, you're looking
system.
at the free water where you're just dumping the water into the creeks.
Well,
You
not
can't
to
dump them in the
creeks,
creeks.
you
They
can't
have to
go to the
be-
creeks.
that's an illicit
But no.
discharge, I learned.
Right, but no, we're looking at, and I think, John, you have, it's like $15,000 to $16,000
$60,000 with the
to run it on an
recycle
annual
program.
basis. And we've gotten numerous phone calls. I've had numerous phone calls where people in the past wanted us to buy Beach Brook and put in a full-blown swimming pool, irrespective that there's a swimming pool behind. And I'm like, with the lifeguards, et cetera, and the cost, we are too small of a community to do that. So we were looking at something that was up and coming, something to be able to provide our residents.
well, I understand anecdotally, you might have a phone call asking you for any of these specific
Many phone
amenities.
calls.
Many phone calls, maybe, as we live in the community and we speak to community members on a daily basis. I just think that it would have been a wise decision to earlier on include council in conversations about how we use our park space or projects. People who live in this community and who are responsive to the people who live in this community should have been included in those conversations earlier on. Yes, we can vote up or down now on a project, but wouldn't it be nice to have the project tailored to the community with council's input?
Okay.
And maybe it would have been this project or a different project, but that was never the opportunity that was presented. I think the process was flawed. I think the people did an excellent job. The presentation is spectacularly well done, and I am very appreciative of all the hard work. I know people have been very dedicated to working on this. You can see it in this, what was a PowerPoint and is now a hard.
Okay, well, listen, we have 5 people here at the council table. I think we need to have a vote. And let's have a vote, move on, and it'll be either approved by the council or not. But we have an important conversation on the agenda tonight regarding pedestrian usage in this city. So unless you have something more to add here,
I just wanna
Kathy,
make
let's
one
just have a vote.
comment is that could we get out of the routine of presenting to council 2 weeks before, or, just like a rush to apply for a grant? Could we have this go through maybe road and infrastructure? And if we don't have that, maybe create something for a channel, or I'm happy to talk about these projects at council as well. But I think there has to be a process because we were elected to be good stewards of our taxpayers' money, and the residents, need to know about this, and we need to think about it. And, it's not the same council that it was. And we need to think about things, and we have big projects that we're thinking about, the sewer project that the city just spent $1 million on that we weren't thinking of. we're talking about walkability. So I think we really have to have kind of a concept in our head and be very good stewards of the taxpayers' money about projects that we want to do. Of course, we want to improve the playground. And of course, we appreciate all the staff's input and work into this. But I feel like we should know about this a little bit earlier because it comes about the same time every year.
Okay, I'm gonna call a vote now to adopt the resolution. Yes, to reject the resolution, no. Sheila, please call the roll.
Ms. Zatrok?
We're not suspending any rules or
No,
anything.
it's
This
a
is,
It's a resolution.
this is a resolution, so I am voting. No.
Ms. Wetland?
No.
Mr. Daga?
Abstain.
Mr. Mr. Gentili? Sorry, it's just Kevin.
I guess I'll say no.
And Dr. Wong.
No.
Okay, we can move on then. Let's thank you all for your attention to it. Thank you to the staff for your very hard work preparing it for presentation. We are now going to move on to what I've put on the agenda as a discussion of walkways pursuant to the outcome of the 2023 community survey. Obviously, an important discussion, which I suspect we have members of the audience attending tonight for that, as opposed to the splash pad discussion, although I can't be positive of that. Prior to this meeting, in order to assist council in this, I requested that the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission drill down a little more. They had not presented it in their original documentation, so it wasn't available to us. But at my request, they have drilled down more, and I've supplied to council the breakout of the residents of our major streets, how they voted in support or of pedestrian pathways in general, and in front of their homes particularly. Generally, the percentages were well in favor of it. They were not that dissimilar. They ticked down. In some places, they were higher. In some places, they were lower than the overall of the community. I think it reflects still a general majority support for doing it. And more importantly, Mr. Sheehy has prepared a memorandum that was distributed to council prior to this meeting yesterday, which really is a response to what we see as a necessary planning tool for council's consideration. The mapping of a sidewalk generally, in its broadest sense, isn't hard. We all know where our major streets lie. The question before council, again, is pretty much what I posed regarding the splash pad. The primary question is, do you support them or don't you support them? And if you support them, where do you support them? So what Don has done is review the major streets, and without doing the engineering, has created a estimate of what pathways in along any particular major road could be anticipated to cost. The design of it, obviously, Don can speak to more. Basically, a sidewalk is a 5-foot path. That's what it is. And Don can explain why it's a 5-foot path. So the real question before council this evening is to have this discussion as to what do you want to do? Before we get to that, I'm going to let Don go through his thoughts and estimates so that council can hear it.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just did a quick look at the city, I know there was a lot of discussion about where should paths be and should we study every major corridor. And really, if you look at ways, and we've had some of these discussions before, but if you look at ways to connect your institutional uses, your retail uses to some of the larger residential neighborhoods and actually give somebody a destination. So when they get on a sidewalk, they can take it to, to the store or to a synagogue or a church or to the city hall or to playground, a park, those types of things. You want to make sure that you don't just build a sidewalk to nowhere. So to me, the two main chunks, I guess, would be Lander Road and Shaker are probably the most obvious choices for first steps in terms of a sidewalk or a path. Lander Road literally runs through the center of the geographical center of town in the north-south, very close to the dead center of town. So you're going to be able to touch the largest number of houses. It goes past a number of institutional uses. You got Ursuline College on the north, the country club, and then on the south end you have our retail, and also gets you close to other shopping and schools and library and that type of stuff. So I just looked at section by section. What does each piece cost? So if you started a sidewalk or a path on the north end of the circle at Chagrin, and you went to South Woodland, that's about $145,000. From South Woodland up to Shaker is about $465,000. Shaker to Fairmount, $500,000, and Fairmount to Cedar, I have it about $350,000. I put an asterisk next to that one because there is quite a bit of space there in front of the Ursuline campus. They may want to do something with a pedestrian path or tie it into some of their landscaping. So there's maybe an opportunity to do something a little unique at that spot.
Don, can I ask what your formula is for figuring out those numbers? Do you have like figuring this out, like square foot, square yard?
It's a cost per foot, and then depending on where it is, there's some additional monies put in based on the number of driveways that we're going to have to cross. There's some sections that are fairly long without any driveways. It's relatively easy to put the sidewalk in. Other areas are a little bit more complicated. So,
And does it?
I'm sorry.
No, Johnny, please.
I once heard you mention the figure of $600,000 per mile. Is that approximately?
It's pretty close to that. Yeah, from a design standpoint, I'm at about $100 a foot, which is a little over $500,000 a mile. And then there's some additional cost for the design, the surveying, and some anomalies, or even when you approach an intersection, you're going to have some curb ramps and things like that that have to be done that cost a little bit more than just putting in the regular path.
And ultimately, I just throw in now for you to keep in the backs of your minds as you're considering any pedestrian walkway here. Don and I have had the conversation of the landscaping of this also, that rather than simply a slash of sidewalk, that he and I are certainly open to council support for spending some more money to do appropriate plantings along the way in the right of way so that our city is beautified by this project as we get it underway. And that way we are not only enhancing the pedestrian walkability of our community, but we're enhancing the physical attributes of our community, making it that much prettier. So keep that in the back of your mind. Those numbers aren't necessary. Are they baked into these or not?
This has fairly modest landscaping baked into this number. And landscaping is really something that you want to be site specific on. You don't want to put up a lot of landscaping in an area where you might have a site distance issue with it. So it's really selective based on where, between a couple of houses, you may not use that much landscaping, but maybe in some of the larger stretches where there's not a lot of driveways, you may take an opportunity to put some additional landscaping or some low features that don't create a visual issue.
And that landscaping would be the responsibility of
City. These would have to be
So
low maintenance things that the city is
we're thinking then
responsible to maintain.
trees.
Yeah,
We were
not-
talking
Yeah.
trees, shrubbery, bushes, things like that.
Yeah.
Kind of
Hanging
self-maintaining.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
hanging baskets.
Well, those have to attach to
In
something.
certain areas, you could put them.
Right. Anyway, Tony, you had a question, then I'll let Don continue with his
That was
journey.
my question. Are we talking trees?
Yeah, in places we are.
So in the old days,
Depends on the
used to call-
wires overhead.
Right.
And obviously, but yeah, but
in the
there
old days,
are,
we used to call it a tree
but,
lawn.
but there are trees. We used to call that a tree lawn back where I grew up. Yes. Don.
Yeah, the same where I grew up.
But just to make sure council is aware, there are trees that are appropriate even for a utility side of the roadway where you have overhead wires, which,
Because they grow only to.
you know, a decorative cherry or whatever some decorative tree is can be beautiful, but it's not going to grow up into your wires. It's only, and Pepper Pike originally, and it's will be part of has a tree plan that was generated by, I think it was CEI back in the day. This is, I think, in the 50s. And there's a book with pretty little watercolor pictures of appropriate trees to plant under their high power lines. So there are trees that even the utilities respect as being appropriate for growth under their trees.
Right. Yeah. And there are trees that you could plant. And you also have to look at not only what's above, but you don't want to plant trees directly over the water main or some other larger utility. So you have to be selective as to where you put them.
Well, I would think that planting trees too close to a sidewalk would ultimately disrupt the sidewalk. That's a concern. I mean, correct? I mean,
It can be
root
if it's the wrong type of tree. Certainly, where I grew up, they planted a lot of silver maples, which totally destroyed the sidewalks in no time, and it became a really big problem. But you could do more ornamental trees that don't get more than maybe an 8-inch diameter, 6 to 8 inch
are
diameter.
we also talking about anything beyond other than trees? Or is this primarily trees? And have we thought about a design plan? Because this would be the biggest aesthetic impact of infrastructure probably in recent memory in Pepper Pike. And one of my concerns would be that, what it looks like, for the people who traverse it and live here and for the people who it's in front of their homes.
Right.
So I don't know if we've concerned.
We've not got to that, any planning obviously yet.
Okay.
This is an initial discussion, a presentation, just conceptually get council's feel for even proceed. You have your survey results. The question really will come back at the end of this evening to, do you want to step ahead at all with it? Because this guy and anyone else is not going to be engaged to do a lot of planning if the concept isn't even supported. Don, could you continue on
Sure.
your journey?
Yes, and just to point out on Lander Road, the tree lawn or that the grass area from the curb to the right of way, which is city right of way, is 29 feet wide. So there is ample space for a 5-foot path and plenty of additional green space and some opportunities to do plantings or small trees and that type of landscaping. There's a lot of green space there. So I think you can do something that's nice in that space for sure. Then we go to Shaker Boulevard, which is really your big east-west connector. I think it obviously ties to the City Hall complex where we are here. It gets you to institutional uses right here at the circle. There's synagogues and schools and churches all along Shaker. On Shaker, the right-of-way is not as wide. It's a 60-foot right-of-way, which is about a 17-foot tree lawn area on each side of the pavement. And for that, it's a little bit more restrictive. There's less opportunity to put a large meander in the sidewalk. It ends up being fairly linear, but then you're still maybe having to work around certain trees or fire hydrants or other features that might be in the right-of-way. Lander Road is currently a wider street than Shaker. It's about 4 feet wider. It's a little bit more generous in terms of space for people to operate on. And we do see a lot of pedestrian and bicycle traffic on Lander. Shaker is just a little bit narrower, but I think that it would be a good location for a sidewalk. Yes.
Don, question, I didn't see it in here, side of the street. Is that
Yeah.
determined? Because I know I heard during Mayor's state of the city, like on Shaker, there was a certain side.
Yeah, and
Is
I think
there-
that's still a design element. My initial thought on Shakers that it probably would go on the north side of the street,
Okay.
because on the south side we have utility poles. We just put a storm sewer line in there. There's still some other settlement that's going to occur above that storm line. So I think it would likely go on the north side. But again, we haven't done a deep dive in terms of trying to actually physically design it. You have to look at number of driveways, conflicts, things like that. And so I don't want to commit to that's where it's going to go. But
Okay.
And from a preliminary basis, that would be a likely location.
And here,
So on
just
the
a-
opposite side from the utility poles and the sewer, if they're on the same side, would more likely be the choice.
Right.
All other things being equal.
Right. On the north side, you do have the water line and you have the fire hydrants. So, there's a little bit of a design issue around there. Usually not a big deal, but we really haven't tried to finalize any design. But that my initial thought would be likely the north side.
So just, this is very nuts and bolts, but it's just a question I've had thinking about what it will look like and how it would function. So when we are putting it in, we're crossing many, many driveways.
Mhm.
Are we putting sidewalk in through the driveway then? Or are we, or are we using the driveway as it stands? Because the surface on each driveway is gonna vary in quality and
Right.
And
Right.
material.
material.
Yeah. It is really kind of a case by case basis. You could have somebody that has a very nice level driveway that's concrete that you could just abut it with sidewalk and be done. There's other locations where, quite frankly, the driveway's not in good shape. It's not really safe to walk on. So, and sometimes it involves getting the building department involved in citing somebody for a bad driveway, but it may be an asphalt surface and we may want to go across with the concrete.
So is that
Sidewalk.
that's incorporated into our estimate?
That's incorporated into the big number. That includes assuming that we're going to have to do something at each driveway. And it's going to be mostly probably cutting an asphalt section out and putting in sidewalk.
Okay.
And so I came up with some rough numbers from here at City Hall at the circle here, and also, by the way, any walkway on Shaker would connect to the circle, which again has multi-purpose paths that go all the way into Beechwood and points west. But to run from this location to Lander Road is about $550,000. And then the section from Lander to Pepper Creek Drive is about $380,000. I don't really recommend extending it past Pepper Creek Drive because, quite frankly, it's kind of expensive and I don't see there being a lot of users there. You got the golf course and maybe 8 or 10 houses on that side of the road. So wouldn't necessarily be a big return on investment in terms of who's
Similar
going to
to the
use it.
sewer.
And it takes you to no destination. It takes you to the intersection of Somme and Shaker, and there's nothing else there. So Chagrin Boulevard, this is a unique spot. Currently we have the 4-lane highway essentially with the median in the middle. And it was designed for a different time when anticipated traffic volumes were supposed to be much higher. The traffic volume on that stretch of Chagrin is less than the traffic that's on Lander Road, less than the traffic that's on Shaker. So it really doesn't need to be a 4-lane road. It could be a 2-lane road, and we could take 2 of the lanes and turn a portion of it into either a multi-purpose path or a thinner path, a sidewalk type path, and take the remaining part and actually turn it into green space. It's not a huge distance really from the circle to what I just brought it up to what would be sort of the western edge of the Orange School campus. And that's about $600,000 to do that work. The last street that on my recommendations is another sort of east-west street, and that's South Woodland Road. It has a very wide right-of-way, 100 feet wide. There's a 35-foot tree lawn on either side of it, generally speaking. It's all residential. There's really no destinations other than the existing houses, but there are a lot of large subdivisions that connect to it. And currently, we do have it striped for bike lanes on both sides. So there's already a pretty good spot for a lot of residents to use. I see people walking, jogging, and riding on those bike lanes pretty frequently. To put that in sidewalk from New Brainerd to Lander is about $780,000. And then from Lander to Pine Tree, I have $570,000. Here again, I wouldn't recommend running it all the way out to Som Center Road because you're really not picking up that many houses. It would be not all that cost effective to continue on the rest of the way. This would set up, if you did those projects, you'd set up a pretty good grid across the town. And then there might be other ones that you might want to add on to it at some future date. But that would be your core system, really, your core walkway system to get around town. And then there might be, some, if it's really popular, you might want to extend it to some other subdivisions or run something down another street to pick up other areas. So that's again, this was a kind of a quick report I put together for the mayor, but you could spend a lot of money doing a huge study and you're going to end up with the same results, I think.
Okay, thank you, Don.
Sure.
That is the report. And now I think it's up to council to have a conversation between itself as to what you want to do. Dr. Wong has her hand up, so you get to go first.
Well,
What do you want to do?
just a couple things to Don. I was just wondering, it says a 5-foot path. How did you get to that width for these? And we're not calling them sidewalks, right? We're calling it a 5-foot path on your plan?
Yes.
Because sidewalks would,
There is
something else, right?
sort of a legal reason that
Right.
we won't call them sidewalks. But in terms of a walkway, a 5-foot width is the absolute minimum width that you put in the right of way.
Okay.
And that's recommended by the Federal Highway Administration, by American Society of Civil Engineers. It's if you go narrower than that, you have to have an area for people to pass each other every couple hundred feet.
But this is still ADA compliant, right?
No, it is not. No, it's not. It's not ADA compliant because you have the space to build it. If you were in a tight urban situation and you only had 4 feet and that was all you had, you could put in a 4-foot walk. But since you have the space, you have ample space, the answer isn't let's put in a skinny walk because we want to put in something that's smaller. You put in the standard size, the correct size walk, and you don't have little areas for people to pass each other every couple hundred feet.
My question just came up because on the Gates Mills Boulevard path, it's double that size at 10 feet. So I was just wondering why there's such a remarkable difference between the two
Yes,
paths.
I can answer that.
Because-
This is strictly this is a pedestrian path. This is not designed as a multi-purpose path. Now, a multi-purpose path is designed to handle bicycle traffic and pedestrian traffic in both directions. So the 5-foot becomes 10 feet wide because you're trying to manage people that are basically going in both directions at the same time without having somebody to have to abandon the path to let somebody pass them through there. So a multi-purpose path has a higher design speed and it's designed for slightly higher volume and it's designed for, recreational active bike riding as well as pedestrian use. So the use is what changes the width of the
So
path.
these paths wouldn't allow kids to bike on? Like that would be illegal?
It would be legal for kids to ride on the path, on this path. But the intent of the design is not to create a bikeway for it. You're not encouraging bike ridership on this path. Little kids could ride their bike on this path. Yes.
And
The use of a multimodal path or
It's a multi-purpose path.
multi-purpose path on Gates Mills median. Of course, that median's 130 feet wide. So design-wise, it's determined to fit there, pretty successfully. And also, and it's not simply the grant that we are trying to achieve for that, but it's also the trigger, as Mr. Gentili's aware, for other types of funding that the city can receive for things like the repaving of Gates Mills Boulevard, which is available because it would become that multimodal.
But you can have a
street.
multi-use path that's 6 feet wide or 8 feet wide or 9 feet wide like we have here in the circle, right? Because the one out here is 9 feet wide.
It is not a multi-purpose path. The-
So people can't ride their bikes up.
They can. People, let's be clear. People will ride their bikes on a 5-foot path. They'll ride it on an 8-foot path, but it's not really what it's designed or what you're
I
encouraging
mean,
people
I
to do.
encourage walkability. I'm worried about the aesthetics of it and the width of it and the maintenance of it. And then, is it going to be straight? Is it going to be curved? We need to think about a lot of things like what the material is going to be. Is it going to be asphalt? Is it going to be concrete? And now I'm hearing about landscaping. And that kind of concerns me because I look at the circle here with all the dead trees in it because they were planted maybe a little bit too closely or not watered or something, but there's a lot of dead trees in.
No, we don't. We do not have a lot of dead trees out there. I'm sorry. We do not have, you're characterizing it there. We do not have a lot of
Well,
dead trees out there, Kathy.
I'm just concerned. Plus, homeowners, they like their front yards to be a certain way. And then for us to pop in a bunch of trees for them, I think we need to talk to them a lot before we decide to re-landscape their front yard.
Yeah, we don't have to landscape anything. That was a suggestion because we are sensitive to the idea of aesthetics in the city as to what will be attractive for people. I think it is something that requires a conversation. Do we or don't we landscape? How do we landscape, if at all? I think it's part of the conversation.
That's great.
What you, Dr. Wong, and have appropriately encouraged, and others, the whole council, I think, supports the idea. I don't think it's simply you, is that we need to have a conversation about this. And, the reason that I put it on the agenda tonight was to have the beginnings of that conversation, not to reach a final conclusion tonight about anything. But if we don't step forward and start responding to this, issue, then, we should just put surveys and everything else in a circular file and let the recycling people deal with it. Because people have expressed an opinion. You can like it or not like the opinion, but it's something that deserves conversation at this council. Tony, yes.
I want to say that we have to start talking somewhere, and this is the appropriate place to start talking. And like you said, there won't be any final decisions made tonight. We won't be making final decisions, I would think, for probably months. Mr. LeMay put out a written suggestion on the process, and I haven't really studied that completely, but I think that that's in the right direction, that we really need to have a lot of conversation about this. I'm not opposed to walkability. I'm a little bit opposed to changing the nature of the city. That's a big consideration that we have to balance with walkability and all of the other positive aspects. And there's another thing that we need to use to balance it with. And the funds are not unlimited. I know we have a nice size fund, ability to buy things. However, there are other priority items that will need to compete with this walkability project. Number one being the circle at Lander and Chagrin. So there's a lot of competing stuff, but I agree totally with the mayor in bringing this up tonight so that we can begin a conversation. And I'm only sorry that our other two colleagues are not here to join in this beginning of a conversation.
And I was going to echo that. I think it's important that they have the ability to weigh in.
Well, there will be a lot of conversation.
And there will be a lot
And
of
they will have
conversation.
they will have
I
their
appreciate
opportunity.
the idea also of kind of having a process that we can work through this together. Because I think there are big picture questions that we need to answer. And then as we move forward, maybe smaller details that I think are small but are important. Maybe they seem small to some people. To me, they are important. So if we were to pursue this, the aesthetics of it, I think, are extremely important. To some people, that might seem like a triviality, but if we were to pursue that, I think it's very important. And I would like to hear what our other council members think.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between what I see as a sidewalk when I drive down Fairmount in Beechwood and when I drive south on Lander and I see what they've done in Orange. They're two completely different things in my mind.
And I think we're not clear at this point, and maybe we don't need to be on, for example, materials.
Right.
On, I think as you or Kathy mentioned, I'm not sure, whether it's straight, whether it curves, all of those things I think are very important. And I've spoken to a few people at Orange when they went through their process. And it was also a process, and there was a lot of detail put in. That doesn't mean that we would make all the same choices, but I think that our community would expect that process of us.
Yeah, I agree. It's about the process. And I think that this is a good starting conversation. I think we started it a couple weeks ago. We talked about the circle reconfiguration. And I appreciate the document that Don put together. This is the first time that I'm seeing some real cost associated, plan associated with it. It's just been kind of this idea that's been floated around. Once we start getting some more tangible data and some, I guess, some fact finding, some of our due diligence about this, I think we'll be able to sculpt really what the plan is, where the areas we want to target. I think that this is a really nice document. So thank you. I do have a question with the 5-foot path, and then okay. I have a friend who lives in Solon, and I went to visit her, and there was a sidewalk there. There were pedestrians walking side by side in the street instead of on the sidewalk. They made that choice to walk in the street. Do we have the ability to almost encourage those pedestrians to use the walkway that we're giving them? Because I realize those bike lanes are still going to be present on Lander. They're still going to be present on South Woodland if we were to install a path. And I would like to move that traffic to the appropriate place, and not say, oh, well, 3 of us are walking and it's only 5 feet, and so now I have to use the bike path.
Right.
Are those conversations that we can have, and can we
Yeah,
even
and
legislate that?
And I think, Steve, we talked about this a little bit, but if you have a sidewalk available, you can have pedestrians use the sidewalk. It's not available. They're on a side street. There's no sidewalk.
Of course.
They're going to be walking in the street, but you can make it a requirement that if the sidewalk is available, they are to use the sidewalk.
Okay.
But not with bicycles. Bicycles are a little different.
Okay.
Typically, a person that would ride on the sidewalk with a bicycle would be a child. Adults or people over a certain age are allowed to ride their bicycle on the street. There is, Steve, I think we talked a little bit about, there is sort of a cutoff that you could actually make sure that, an 8-year-old kid's not riding in a busy street if the sidewalk's available, that they actually have to use the sidewalk.
Right. I mean, 'cause safety is a huge component of
Right.
this, and it's, I think, one of the driving forces behind the
Right.
discussion. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with usage.
And that's a little bit of a difference, if I might, just on the multi-purpose path. The idea with the multi-purpose path is you don't have that interaction with driveways, for instance. It's designed to actually handle a little bit more volume, a little bit more speed. People are more comfortable riding at 10 or 15 miles an hour, as opposed to what this other 5-foot path or sidewalk is primarily pedestrians. It's people walking together, walking their dog, maybe once in a while a family going out with a couple little kids to ride their bikes.
Mhm.
So the use is different, the function of it's different. You are interacting with people pulling out of their driveways, as opposed to Gates Mills Boulevard, where you have this multi-purpose path opportunity where you don't have to deal with those things. You're clearly far away from any kind of interaction with vehicles. So, it's a totally different setup.
I think that brings up a really good point, Don, of like educating the community about maybe what could be happening, so that they're prepared. They may have to pay a little bit more attention as they're backing out of their driveway onto a main road.
Yeah, I guess my initial reaction to requiring people to using the sidewalk is negative. I'd have to think about that a while,
Sure.
because I hadn't thought of it. And I guess I'm kind of like a libertarian in that way. If you want to walk on the street, walk on the street. If you want to walk on the sidewalk, we're giving you the opportunity to do that. But we're not forcing you to do either one.
Tony, my feeling about that is, I remember back in college, and there were sidewalks down in Oxford, Ohio. And around the campuses, there were sidewalks. And you see this dirt path beaten across a green. And it'd be like, well, and the administration was putting up little signs saying, stay on the sidewalks.
Sure.
You can't cut across there. Leave the lawn alone. And people do it. People are like water. They will flow where they're intended. I think the people who want to be on a sidewalk, and I think Emmy brings up or recites what our primary goal is, safety. And through the safety, that's what promotes people wanting to go out and walk, because I think a lot of people don't feel safe on these big streets walking. But safety drives it. And I think people, particularly with children and all, and anyone is going to feel safer on these sidewalks. So I think they will flow to the sidewalk. If someone, for their own unique reason, thinks that they want to walk in the middle of Lander Road instead of on a safe sidewalk, Godspeed. I hope they don't get hit.
Good luck.
It was purely an observation that I had.
No,
that,
and I'm
that
not,
I'm going, okay, so they have sidewalks. They're choosing to walk in the street. This blows my mind. Like you have it there. Why? How can we affect that change?
I mean,
So-
there are many
I'm not-
things
I'm
in
not
this room
saying-
that have
Trust me,
blows my
this is
mind.
just the tip of the iceberg,
I'm
Mayor.
not
But
negating that in any way.
I know.
I just feel like people, should be able to make their own choice. And if they make a choice different than yours, that doesn't make them crazy. That just makes them different.
Just a point of clarification, are these numbers anticipating asphalt or concrete?
This is, I would anticipate this is concrete. These are concrete.
Okay.
Concrete sidewalks.
We all got the summary from the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission that did the survey. I think they did a great job. They summarized each major street responses by who lived on there. And just bringing it up because they did such great work on it. Overall survey responses, 74% wanted on major streets, and then 48% wanted it on their own home, residence, or business. And Don, you brought up Lander and Shaker, but Lander, it was like 48% agree and 48% disagree. And, and Shaker Boulevard, 58% agree, 40% disagree. So I think we really need to talk to the residents and talk this through. And I think this is a great start to the discussion. And I'd actually like to listen to the audience comments about this topic if we could.
Well, we will when we get to the audience comments part.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add, I appreciate that we're using the community survey to kind of get this dialogue going. That's great. I think that there were other points in that survey that maybe we should, as a council, discuss at some point in time. I don't know that tonight's the night, because I would like to have our other members present, but just even the leaf pickup or like I'm looking at the space here and how packed we are. Maybe discussing community, just different ideas that we kind of pull from that survey, because it wasn't just a sidewalk survey, it was a community survey.
Right.
So I think that we as a group need to have a little bit more dialogue
And
about other topics.
And I think that's a good point. I
Yeah.
mean, just as far as this room, I think we've just about hit our capacity according to the fire marshal. So it's a different subject for another day, but perhaps kind of going back to some of the conversation we had prior to this on the prior topic, it's something we might want to consider, because I think we are at the max right now.
Well, we can look at that. Let's talk about this though. Why don't we get a sense from council as to where you are about conceptually what you want to do going forward with even the conversation about pedestrian sidewalks. And I understand if someone is uncomfortable with the idea, you should say it. If you're comfortable with the idea, then, you should say that too, so that we know at least where we are on this, as opposed to, simply survey results. There are 30 whatever % of people who just didn't want it. Those people may be on this council, and I think we need to understand, at least with this group here, who is or isn't, supportive of the idea, so we can go forward
think
You know,
we should
just so we
think
have
about-
conceptually, where
I think-
are we?
I think conceptually, we've all contributed to the conversation. I don't know that taking any sort of a straw poll of sorts, especially without two of our members here, is fair. I think that I personally, I need to digest what Don's told us. And I mean, we got that at 6
Yeah, and there'll
PM
be some
yesterday.
meetings where some
Let's-
of you may not be at meetings, frankly. Sometimes, you know, why either of them are not at this meeting. Scott, I understand. His wife is retiring tonight. I understand why Scott's not here.
We haven't
Jim, I don't know
put
where
him
he
on
is,
either.
but there will be meetings where, you know, different people miss
I'm
different
listening.
meetings for different
This is
legitimate
more important
reasons.
than speaking.
But we're not going to
Mike,
stop having the discussion until we can all be at a single meeting is all I'm saying. We will continue to have our discussions and people, fortunately, we tape these discussions and our absent members tonight can catch up, which I encourage them to do so that they are not behind, and anyone who misses a meeting, I hope will watch our tapes so that you're caught up to the conversation. I think that we're going to schedule this conversation at a lot of our meetings going forward.
I thought that was the
It's going
intent
to be
last
on the
meeting.
agenda. I think it's important that we keep the conversation going. So, because otherwise it's just going to not occur. So I'm not trying to impose it on everyone, but if we don't have that discipline to continue to have the conversation, I think we will not proceed one way or the other regarding the subject matter. And
I
hope
don't
you'll
want to
all
speak on
support that.
anyone's behalf, but I think we're all committed to continuing the conversation and the conversation about walkability. I think there's so many details that, and I think our prior conversation was emblematic of that, that we feel a need to know the details, maybe in something like this even more so.
Okay.
And so that's my perception. I don't want to speak out of turn for anybody else.
And that's exactly the type of information that we as an administration need to hear from you because, okay, Don put effort into putting this together. Where do you want, we're going to have more discussions. What do you want to know next about this so far as what streets you want to consider first to be evaluated for sidewalks?
I think
Because, you know, he can't operate in a vacuum, obviously. And we need some direction from council as to where you want to go. Tony?
I talked about this, I think, in the last two infrastructure meetings. And I think I'm always anxious to do a test before we, jump in with both feet. And my position then, and it still is, that we should do the sidewalk that has a destination in mind, and that would be from the school to the circle, because there was some request that there was a need for that people wanted to have that for safety of the high school students in making that trip. And so I still think that that's an important consideration in where we would go first.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks for those comments.
I will respectfully disagree with that comment. Mayor, and I will say, you set the agenda for our meetings. I think if you want to have a continual sidewalk discussion, walkability discussion that is ongoing is great. My idea is for Don to, I like what he did with the different areas. We're going to have to delve deeper into every single one of those projects at some point in time. Why not do it at the onset? Let's look at what infrastructure needs to be updated on any of these, which roads are truly ready to receive the project. I said this just a couple meetings ago, that I do want to know those details because I don't want to lay something down just to tear it back up. I expressed that already. So I think that being able to analyze and compare even the 4 areas that he's given us makes sense for us then to make that first step. But I need more information than what this is given to just say, oh, well, I think that South Woodland's a great idea or whatever. I still have a lot of questions.
Okay,
Like,
that's, I need that. We
Yeah, no,
need
I
that
appreciate-
input. That's
like,
why I'm asking the question.
yeah, like, and that way I think that we can rank it better as a council as to what really makes sense and where our dollars are going to go the farthest, because as witnessed by the concrete bid, we're really kind of guessing on some of the cost of this. what will that first project truly cost us? And what is it going to be to maintain it? So that's where I
Okay.
stand.
Anyone else?
For next time, could we get the cost of like maintenance of like these same things, like maintenance and annual maintenance or things like
On the
that?
sidewalk?
Yeah.
Um,
the 5-foot path.
Yeah,
Let's not call it a
right,
sidewalk.
yes. Good catch, I guess. It's really, quite frankly, it's really pretty minimal. I mean, you could be 30 years like or more without having to do any major repair work. Occasionally you might, Dominion comes in and does some gas line work 20 years from now, and they might have to take out some of the slabs and replace them.
And in perpetuity.
In perpetuity?
Yeah, perpetuity. It's going to be the city's responsibility, right? Not the residents. We're not going to one day say, "Oh, the city's running the money. You guys are in for the bill."
Well, if Dominion breaks out our sidewalk, they're
They'll
going
have to fix it, yeah. But the thought would be to put something in, when a lot of sidewalks go in lots of subdivisions, they get put in little chunks.
Uh-huh.
So somebody's concrete guy does the driveway and the 60 foot of sidewalk in front of the house. The house I happen to grow up in, where my mom still lives, the original sidewalk is still there and it's in really good shape. There's other places where the sidewalks has been replaced 3 times because maybe they didn't do a good job. But with a project like this, you'd have it all going in with inspected, tested. You're getting a high quality installation that should really last.
So maintenance free for 30.
Maintenance free, probably, or very, very low maintenance for a long time. You could have a large tree fall in somebody's yard and come across and break the sidewalk. I'm not going to say that you're not going to have, on occasion, some piece that has to get fixed, but.
And then what about like the winter time, snow plowing? Do we have that cost in mind? And then liability, is there any sort of liability on the city for nothing?
Yeah.
No,
I don't
it's
think there's a liability
Okay.
issue, and we wouldn't do anything with the snow. We wouldn't.
Wouldn't plow it.
We're not looking to plow sidewalks.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, if council wants to start plowing sidewalks in the future, that's up to council
I
to
think-
authorize that sort of money. We're not looking, and liability wise, I'll let this guy answer, but
No, natural accumulations of ice and snow are not subject to liability. If you went out in the wintertime and put a hose on the bike path or the trail, you might be in some trouble for that because that's not a natural accumulation. But if it's just if it's a snowstorm, be careful. It's dangerous to walk in northeastern Ohio when it's freezing out.
And when you think about those really heavy duty snow incidents, which occasionally happen, we didn't have much last year, but they do happen, right? If we had sidewalk there, you'd be no worse off than you are right now. Because right now, if you get a foot of snow, nobody's walking in the tree lawn area either. They're probably, if they have to, they're going to walk in the street.
Steve, I went to law school about 40 some years ago, so the law may have changed, but as I recall, if you leave the sidewalk alone, there's no liability. But if you don't maintain it in an adequate fashion, you could buy yourself some liability. In other words, you could leave it in a condition that
Well,
somebody could get hurt. And
if the municipality passes an ordinance that imposes an obligation to maintain it, then you can run into some difficulty when that happens. And in some communities, that's their sidewalk program, is that in some of the older communities, they have, you must maintain the sidewalk, and they put a point of sale inspection requirement to back that up so that people keep their sidewalk pieces in line. You're not going to have that here. This is not a community that has that type of situation, and these are going to be community paths in the right of way that are not the obligation of the
I
resident.
was really talking more about plowing and that
Yeah, it's not
probably
gonna,
best not to touch it in terms of liability on the city.
yeah, well, if there is a natural accumulation of ice and snow and somebody falls on a trail, there's not going to be liability for that.
Right.
So Don, I have 2 more specific questions about the maintenance piece. So we don't anticipate any maintenance issues with heavy trucks or snow plows that traverse that part of the sidewalk that crosses a driveway. And the other one is, do we have any concerns about seasonal movement of individual portions and how we would address that?
You could have that issue on occasion. If it's put in the right way, you really should have very minimal issues with some kind of seasonal heaving and that type of thing. Usually that's caused by a drainage issue or something else. It's not just randomly occurring. There's usually a cause. So part of the design, when you design the sidewalk, is you may end up having to put in a couple of small yard drains here and there to pick up some drainage issues. When you actually cross a driveway, what you typically do is you thicken the concrete section of the sidewalk. On the surface, it looks the same, but instead of being 4 inches thick, it's 6 inches thick to match the thickness of the driveway. So it'll be as durable as the driveway itself.
Okay.
Could we look at different materials for the pathway for next meeting? Like what's available out there?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Other than
Different-
asphalt and concrete, you mean?
Yeah, like something that's more permeable, that's better for the environment, that'll allow more drainage of water, because we're always worried about flooding in places, and I know we're doing a whole new basin project on Gates Mills Boulevard because we have flooding issues. So adding more impermeable surfaces. I just was wondering if there's any other materials, but maybe there's not, or different.
I'll give you the really short
colors
answer.
or make it-
Nothing that's worth installing
Okay.
exists that other than concrete sidewalk. And you're also you're creating a little bit of additional impermeable surface, and it's immediately going into a recharge area, which is the lawn. If you were paving from 20 foot wide right out to the street, that's really generating more runoff. But because you have an area that's very close by that can recharge it, which would be the lawn area, you're really not creating the situation where you're creating a huge amount of additional runoff. It's linear, so it's not all concentrated in one area. Like I'm going to have a parking lot and all that water is going to go to a catch basin. Instead, you're putting a very small amount of concrete, and you have a very large area for that water to run and soak into the lawn. And it really doesn't change the runoff in any meaningful way. And a lot of the permeable materials are high maintenance issues. You have to vacuum them periodically, like once or twice a year, run basically a giant shop vac over the top to pull material out. And they heave. They have issues with freeze-thaw cycle problems. I'm not comfortable recommending them because I just don't think they're worth it. And you're really not gaining anything because below that sidewalk is the clay soils that sit impermeable anyway. So all your action really is in that tree lawn in the soft soils right on top.
Don, to get a council and the audience to get maybe a visual picture of this, what's the thought about how far this would be from the street in average? So if it curves and bends, it might be more or less, but
Yeah, I think you'd probably be about no closer than 10 feet from the street, and then hopefully a little bit more where you can. There's areas where you have some very mature trees that you just want to kind of work around,
Sure,
where you might
sure.
get closer.
Yeah.
And there's other areas where you might have a grading issue or something like that. But quite frankly, the meander on some of the stuff in Orange is pretty severe. It's
Yeah.
pretty harsh.
yeah.
And I think that actually defeats the purpose of the meander. You're trying to make it sort of not noticeable, not stick
Yeah.
out. And
I think they tried very hard to avoid the
they
trees.
worked around a lot of different existing features,
Yeah.
and then you have a lot of elevation ups and downs and in and out. And I think you have to do a little bit less of that and try to work with
Yeah.
the grade.
So we're looking at 10 feet-ish.
I would say it could be between 10 and maybe even 20 feet in that range is probably where it would be.
How long is a car again for like perspective from the end of a?
A car is usually 16 to 18 feet long. Parking space is typically 18 feet.
Okay. And this would be like starting at 10 feet to 20 and then be 5 feet wide. So like a car length in from the driveway.
Yeah.
Something like
And
that.
there might be areas where you're a little further back because you have the ability to do that, but I would say that would be
Don, I think 20 feet sounds really far.
Yeah, I think
That seems super.
20. Well, the tree lawn.
I know we have the right of way. I know the
Right,
right of way's there. But from my perspective,
Yeah.
I'd prefer to see this tucked closer to, if 10 feet is a safe distance, you gotta have a safe distance for people relative to the street. I get that. But I think we want to make it, from my chair, I don't get to vote, less intrusive into people's yards to the extent that we can. So I would encourage that as we consider design, that we tuck it closer to the street as opposed to deeper into a yard.
Right.
Just my thought.
Right. And well, and those are parameters that if we dive deeper into doing the design, we'd have to survey this stuff, get locations of trees, hydrants, all those other obstacles, and find out where that good spot is. I think 10 should be about the minimum, generally speaking. There might be times when you go a little closer to the road, but there might be areas where you go as far away as 20 feet. There are some areas on Lander where there's nothing there. You're next to the golf course or a wide open area. It's all city right of way. Why not maybe put it a little further away?
That's a difference.
Right, but that's
a
the far end of the limits, I guess. Right.
Do you know what the ones in Beechwood right here on Shaker are? How far those ones are from the street? Because they're a little more offset than like in Mayfield. Mayfield.
Yeah, I would say that's probably in the range of about 15 feet.
Okay.
I don't quote me on that. It's more than 10, I think.
And the one in Mayfield, they seem very close to the road.
It's a smaller right of way.
Oh, okay.
Mayfield. So yeah, they're pretty tight.
That's the question I have is, if we are getting into so much of design detail, does that mean we have made a decision to have sidewalks?
Oh.
Or do we need to make the basic fundamental decision?
Well, that's what I raised at the beginning of the meeting. And some council didn't want to.
Guessing it was like.
I mean, to me,
They wanted
I'm not a
to
mechanic,
have more
I'm not a civil engineer, I have no clue what it should be or shouldn't be. I guess the decision I need to make, do we do it or we don't do it? Then let them come up with a proposal, rather than 7 of us who have no knowledge of civil engineering trying to make a decision. I'm just listening. My fear is I'll open my mouth and remove all doubts about my foolishness. I'll rather be thought of a fool than open my mouth and remove all doubts about it. I'm just trying to think. We are getting to, my God, I mean, what kind of drapes are we gonna have? have we made the basic decision first? And I don't even know that if that has been made yet.
I agree with Mr.
I don't, I like to have more information. So if
Yeah.
that's troublesome,
But when? My question is, when is that information relevant?
we're having
I
the first
hesitate to get-
conversation.
I get a lot of
proxy.
mails which says funeral plans, and I tell them I have no such plans at this point.
Well,
I
good.
toss that right away. You may be eligible for funeral grant or something, and no, I throw it away. That's not in my plan. So first thing I need to do I want to die tomorrow? Then I'll worry about what
Well, I don't think-
funeral detail I can get. If
I
they're
don't
not gonna
think you
do
have to
sidewalks,
commit.
then how does all of this matter?
I don't think you would purchase a house and say, I want a house and, so I
But
think.
I've said my point. I don't want to argue.
We
It's
have to do our
not,
due diligence as we progress. I think as we progress, we do our due diligence, we monitor, and that is our role. I don't think we're doing the engineering. I think
when we start about materials, width, curves, what is that?
well, that's
Those are, I
relevant
think,
to
important
pricing,
Concept.
to
Okay.
cost estimates.
I'm fine. I should have opened my mouth to show how big a fool I am.
Well, I think that
You're no fool, sir.
Don's write up here is very helpful, but I think, in order to have meaningful discussion, I think this is what Mano was saying. But we need something to start the discussion. We want one that curves. And then we can discuss whether it should curve or not, or we want asphalt, or we want concrete. And they said, well, no, we don't want concrete because, it's too much of a contrast, and asphalt would blend better with the grass. We could have those discussions, but we need something to shoot at, like a straw man, I guess.
And I think the concern is that maybe in some previous instances, we've been given a preloaded plan and said, here's the plan. Do you want it or do you not want it?
Yeah.
And this is a very significant conversation and we would like to shepherd the conversation. So while we're throwing out questions now, I think it's a response to not having these answers and giving an opportunity to ask these questions. Some of them, in my case, I think relate to understanding the cost estimates and understanding are the materials one material or another, which is pretty significant. Perhaps if they were a different material, the cost estimate would be much higher. So understanding what you're looking at, but I agree that as we move through the process, we can and we should address all the details. Yeah, and we don't have to do it all here and now.
No,
It's just when you're given an opportunity to ask
Yeah.
questions,
no,
people
as I
ask
said, I
questions.
think that we're going to be talking about this for at least months.
That's
At
okay. It's
least
a
a few
big
months.
project.
We should. We should. We're talking about a total of investment of $9 million.
And to be clear, it will be a phased project under any circumstance. We can't have construction on every road. Being someone who currently lives in a construction zone, I don't think we need to put our entire city under construction at the same time. So everyone can have a half an hour to get home from here.
You are not a
really-
supporter of
really
the orange
15,
cone
20
industry? Is that what you're saying?
Well, and yes, we could buy our own cones then maybe. We can spread them out.
All right.
I mean, I think the first phase is the Gates Mills Boulevard pathway.
Yeah, I was actually going to point out, like
First
in our walkability
whole
discussion,
thing,
that has not
so.
been brought up. And that's a project that it's been out there. So
All right, Don, do you have information, are you comfortable with input that you've received so far as prepping additional information to provide to council?
Yeah, well, I don't want to say that we've gotten anything definitive, but we've had some very positive conversations with ODNR about potentially getting our piece funded, but they have not given us anything in writing yet. So,
Okay. We'll see where
until we have it, you almost hate to say it because I don't want to
Sure.
ruin our chances somehow, but we are working very hard on getting that funded. And there appears to be a path for that to happen.
Okay, that's
Pardon the
great.
pun, sorry about that.
that's exciting and hopeful because
Yeah.
that is another piece of this discussion that I
And
think.
when
we
I
really-
wrote this up, I'm sorry, like this was really focused on these 5-foot paths. So I specifically excluded the Gates Mills Boulevard path. It is really a standalone, unique area.
That's another economic spend. To
Right.
Tony's point, there are choices we're always making. That's what government's about, making choices. Where do you spend, where don't you spend? That's a choice that'll fold into the conversation as time goes on, hopefully. But so far as what you need to report back to council to progress this conversation regarding the 5-foot paths, I think that some council people have asked for some a little more granular detail as to expenses for, or just I don't know if it goes beyond conceptually, I think it does. Certain sections, challenges that might be encountered
Right.
for a particular section for their consideration as to, well, where do you start? If we were to do this, where would we start? Would it be on this street, that street, the other? And if there are, just whatever challenge exists that would direct it or weight it towards something else, I think that needs to be fleshed out a little for council.
Sure.
So that they can hear that too.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
I said okay?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's important.
Okay, is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Does council have more that it wants to discuss between itself or inquire with Don this evening? Okay. Then I think what we'll do is close that conversation. We're going to hear quickly from our committee and department heads, council, and we'll get on to the audience comments. We did have the finance committee meet this evening. We have our two members of the committee, Mr. Daga and Ms. Zakrak. Do you want to report on the committee?
I would gladly. I had the honor of chairing my first finance committee meeting
There
tonight.
you go.
And I have to
What
say,
happened?
it was a tremendous success. Joe walked us through the budget. Everything looks to be on point. The city is in good financial health. So I'm happy to report that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I don't believe other committees reported met since our last get-together a week ago. Department heads, anything? I will report for myself then. I appreciate the service department's great efforts along with our beautification folks. of having gotten the plants selected and planted at the intersection of South Woodland and Lander. I don't pretend to know the names of the plants, but neither does John, but they are beautiful. You'll notice there is a begins with an S. I know that. It's a very dark leaf plant and it looks really striking. I really think they're pretty. And I congratulate everyone for their hard work getting that done. I saw it was already being watered again today by our capable service department. And we do have our summer prepped for the maintenance of our various plantings. We have coming, before we meet again, since I have such a great audience to talk to this evening, I would remind you that we have our Memorial Day commemoration coming up. I invite everyone to attend. We'll have a new speaker, but in general, I can tell you now, it's going to be the same, taken with the same seriousness as our prior commemorations. It's not a party. It's less than a funeral, but it's certainly a remembrance of people who gave their lives for this country. And that is the way we treat it. So there's a certain solemnity to how we perform. We welcome the Orange High School Band and the Lionettes, which is the flag team. I always forget the name of the Lionettes, but it's the flag team that works with the band. And it's always wonderful. And I appreciate, because a lot of these kids, school is done for them, particularly the seniors, by the time this happens. And they train and they come back for this performance. And it's really, touching to have these young people do that for the community. And we appreciate it very much. I'll say that in advance. Our speaker this year, I mentioned it last week, for those not here, it is retired Master Chief Sergeant Frank Baba, which is the highest non-officer rank in the Air Force. Frank has tremendous experience, having participated in virtually every active mission since the first Gulf War. So I'm sure he'll have some recollections regarding the brave military individuals who he worked with and got to take care of. Other than that, I don't believe I have anything more I need to report to you tonight. So thank you, Council. Any comments, or we'll move on to the audience?
I just have one small thing, unrelated to these projects. I received a question from a community member, similar question to it that we received, not our project, but the Gates Mills ODNR project, the water project, about the timing, about the noise from the pumps and the diesel fumes from the pumps. We had a good discussion that it wasn't a Pepper Pike controlled project and that we were on top of it, but I didn't know if you had any further updates since the question was last asked, because I felt maybe I could at least convey what we know.
Yes, and if it's the same person that I talked to,
I'm not sure,
okay.
but I just.
I told her it was end of this month. They want to be out of there, so they're talking
Okay.
May 31st. They should be completely gone.
Okay.
With that equipment, so
And
they're still on track to do that.
I will pass along. I know they're troubled by the noise and the fumes, and
Yes.
I explained that there's very little, unfortunately, while the project we value, there's very little about that we can do as far as the actual execution of the project and timing, but that's good to know.
Thank you. Anything else, Council?
Only thing I want to do is thank you again for opening the discussion on the sidewalks tonight. I think that's very valuable and it's a very good start. And I look forward to getting more data and more conversation on this.
I'm glad we are underway. Thank you, Tom. All right, we do have a large audience with us tonight for comments. and I say it with all respect and politeness. This is not a town hall that we're about to engage in. These are comments where council and myself, we want to hear your thoughts about anything, but particularly I think you're here for the sidewalks, which I think would be most relevant to this conversation this evening. Because there's so many people here, I don't know if you all want to talk. Maybe you're here just to listen. But if you want to speak, because there are so many people, I'm going to ask that you be respectful of everyone else and limit the length of your comments. I think if we put a minute and a half clock on it, you can say a lot of things in a minute and a half, guys. That's really a pretty long time. I'm a trial lawyer for 44 years. You can say a lot of things in a minute and a half. So I just ask you to be respectful of everyone. If someone's already said your thoughts, feel free to join in to their comments. If you feel that it's better if you get to say it yourself, that's fine too. We're here to hear it, but if you can join in someone else's already well-stated views, feel free to align yourself with those comments. Okay, and we'll kick it off. When you speak, since some of you haven't always been here, you need to say your name and your address so Sheila can take it down for the record. Please.
Jackie Bodick, 27 Hunting Hollow. First of all, I'm really excited about the sidewalk conversation. I was not prepared to come in and see like numbers and everything. That's awesome. I really hope it moves along and doesn't just get stuck in endless, details, this and that. I take your point, Mr. Dobbin, in terms of we're not civil engineers, let them do their job. I was also really surprised about the splash pad. I had no idea that was a topic. Super excited about it. I have a text chain with about 15 neighbors, all with almost all with elementary age kids. And so I texted, oh my gosh, splash pad in Pepper Pike Park, this is amazing. And then to have it voted down unanimously is just shocking to me. So think about your neighbors with younger children, and mine are almost like kind of aging out of that splash pad thing. We have the space, we potentially have the money. I hope that it could potentially come back up again as a topic sometime soon. I think it would be a huge addition to the community. And looking at the responses from the surrounding communities, emphatically saying, yes, this was amazing, we do it again, we wish they'd done it bigger. I think that the objections to it are far outweighed by the potential benefit. That's all.
Thank you. Who's next? Mr. Naft?
Manny Naft, 2632 Sound Center Road. In comments to all the council, I believe that the reason why we're having so much difficulty tonight talking about sidewalks, we're starting in the middle of this project. What we should be doing first is talking about the community survey, and then looking at the community survey, and then decide, okay, from that survey, does council feel that the city should be addressing? And then you take those items and you add them to the other items that was talked about, like Councilman Tony mentioned in regards to Lander Circle. And what we need to do then is to develop a long-range plan, okay, that identifies all the projects that we want to look at. And in that long-range plan, it will be maintained, the things will be prioritized. We could look at budgets, we could look at timelines, okay, and the item is, we need to look at this holistically. We're coming in the middle right now. All of a sudden, we're talking just about the sidewalks from the survey. It took us 2 years to get to the survey. Okay, let's take the survey data and decide what we want to do. And with that, we want to do Lander Circle, land conservancy we talked about, the dollars that we need to put aside for that. We need to talk about the multi-purpose trail. There's never been a decision from council in regards to, if we don't get this grant, are we doing the multi-purpose trail or aren't we? We need to decide what we're going to do as a long-range plan. And just like we have a budget, for the year, we've got 100 items on that, and here's the different things. And with that, we're allocating X number of funds. Currently, the last statement is that currently we have $15 million in the general fund. It's projected to be $27 million in 5 more years. Kudos to council and to what you've done in regards to putting the city, back on track. So the item is, you need to then start in there in regards to, that $15 million, take, let's just say, half of it and put it into rainy day fund, okay? Then the sidewalk discussion that was being talked about tonight, that's $4.2 million. Lander Circle, I don't know how many $1 million it is. Other items on here, the multi-purpose trail, that's, another $1 million. So the item is, okay, you need to put together this long-range plan and maintain it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next?
Very good.
This lady in the front, I thought had a question. Her hand's down. Oh, Mary Ann, hi.
Mary Ann, legend 29826 South Liberty Road. We moved into Pepper Pike over 25 years ago. We came from University Heights where we had sidewalks. And the bombardiers, we called them, shoveled your sidewalk. We were so glad that Pepper Pike had no sidewalks. We do have a mailbox at the end of our long driveway. So I don't know what would happen to the mail if the mail now's boxes are moved way, way up. And who will maintain then these sidewalks? Because frankly, if there's snow covered, then the people are going to continue to walk in the street, which has already been plowed. And the same goes to say that this path or whatever it's supposed to be down Gates Mills Boulevard, somebody has to mow the grass in between and take care of the plantings and whatever. And as far as tree height goes, I drive down Bolingbrook frequently, and there have been big trucks out there because trees have grown and they are interfering with the stop signs, for one. You have to trim those down, but also with the utility poles. So I really think before the discussion of how much this sidewalk's going to cost and that sidewalks, are we really even going to do sidewalks, period? How many people will be impacted? I, for one, don't want a sidewalk.
Thank you. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Hi, Rich Gent, 31760 Creekside Drive. I am in favor of sidewalks. I moved to this city 16 years ago, and it was one of the biggest disappointments moving here that we didn't have sidewalks, but moved here for the schools. Kids are in high school and middle school, and one of the biggest disappointments they had growing up is that they can't ride to school. There's no safe way for them to get there. Coming here tonight, I'm confused as why we've done more than one survey, and the survey keeps coming up that people want the sidewalks. Why aren't we talking about right now putting these sidewalks in somehow? And why is the discussion with council about these details? And why aren't we just figuring out who wants to do this and either move forward or not move forward, but stop all this, like, just, it seems like just discussion about details that we're not even near. So I do think we need to get towards just a plan of, are we going to listen to the survey, listen to the residents, and move on and get with these sidewalks? That's it.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Megan Sopranos, 31051 Northwood, and Rich just said it almost verbatim what I wanted to say and what Mr. Daga said. Like, I too moved here in 2007 with 3 young children, and that was the biggest thing that we thought was a con to coming out here, was not having sidewalks, but we did it, and the topic's been brought up every year we've been here, chitter chatter, never happened, want it to happen. And finally I saw some movement and I got the surveys and I filled out my survey, and I'm obviously pro sidewalks. And now I come to this meeting and my hopes are dashed. I would like to understand if the council is pro sidewalks to start the movement and then figure out the details, or not. And then I don't want to have my hopes up anymore about it.
Thank you. Yes.
2 things. One about, I'm sorry, Luann Graham, 31437 Shaker Boulevard. I'm going to ask Ms. Weltman about this. He said something about riding, the kids walking or riding their bikes to school. Didn't you say at one of the meetings that they weren't allowed?
We don't generally respond, but it's not school policy for students to ride
Did
to
you say?
school. It is not currently, to my knowledge, Orange school policy to allow children to ride to school, and it's not necessarily just because of safety. But that's up to this current school board to set policy.
So currently, they're not allowed or not encouraged.
I believe they're
to
not, I
ride
believe
their
they are
bike to
not
school.
allowed to ride to school.
So that would negate a sidewalk.
But, the
Yeah,
school board
that's
sets
it. No
policy.
school board can do anything. The second point, question is there any update on the construction on Shaker? Are they on schedule? Are they?
Yes, they're on schedule. First Energy is still moving utility poles, and they're in that process. Once they complete the utility pole relocation work on the east side of Lander on Shaker, then they will start the storm sewer replacement on the east side.
I know that the electric company's been moving.
Right.
Then they have to wait for Spectrum to come out and AT&T to come out, and
Yes.
then another company or another agency, or illuminating company, has to come out and remove the poles.
There's Spectrum has to relocate. There's usually take like a couple of days. It's a single line. It's not a big deal. Then AT&T's got more lines on there, but they actually move pretty quickly. AT&T actually removes the pole.
Okay.
And have they removed? They've removed on this side.
Yes, they're all everything's been done on this side. Yeah.
The storm sewer also.
Yes.
Okay. Michelle?
Michelle Halloran, 3101 Northwood Drive. I think my sentiment is our residents deserve sidewalks and a walking path. They deserve it. They have done what you've asked them to do. They have jumped through the hoops. They've answered your surveys multiple times.
Could you speak up, please?
Oh, and it's a resounding response that they want sidewalks. I too am really echo Rich's comments. I'm taken aback that we have confusion in the room on whether we would move forward. I didn't think this conversation would be an if. I thought this conversation would be a how and a when. And the fact that we are not there is staggering to me as a resident. And it's an immense safety issue. I know Deanna's here today, and I know she's spoken this thing before, but we have kids. It's a safety issue. We are in the minutia and these details, but your residents have spoken time and time again. I just don't think it's fair that we keep doing this to them. If you're not gonna move forward, just tell us. Just let us know. And I would like city council members to take a strong position and tell us where they stand on it, so at least we know. I think we would do that at this point. This has gone on long enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Mira Bar Savage, 29600 Shaker Boulevard. I first want to start out by thanking the council and mayor and Don for a good job. I'm proud to be in a community that our biggest concern is walkability. I've lived in communities where it's crime and other issues like that. So I thank you for that. One of the things is I've been following for years. That's part of Gates Mills. So that's really exciting. If anybody isn't familiar with Greenways, it's something to look up. This one, I have just very brief, but it's 134 pages that talks about the plan for Cuyahoga County, linking all the trails together. So there's actually 850 miles of trails. Currently, I think there's 200 and something. So it's just really exciting that we're part of that. And it mentions the Gates Mills Trail in the Greenway. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. This meeting was very informative.
I'm sorry, could you give Sheila your name and your, that's helpful if you
My
stand.
name is Nina Malakudi, and I live 21950 Shaker Boulevard, just a few houses up. For past few months, our life has been upside down with all the construction of the sewer and everything. And they are doing a very good job. I mean, but we had electrical, problems and anyways. I really think, considering the size of the Shaker Boulevard, as narrow as it is, it's going to be so close. We have column posts that if there is sidewalk, that has to be removed or it has to be changed. And these are kind of expensive, and we are not the only ones. There are other, and I have actually measured, it's gonna be right by the post that we have. And we have 4 of them. two on one side and two on the other side. And looking into all the obstacles that we face, I'm not against sidewalk for the Pepper Pike, but I think it should be taken into consideration for every city, every street is going to be different. I think Shaker Boulevard, as it is, as narrow as it is going to be very tough to do that with all the obstacles of sewer lines and the water lines on the other side. That's my view. It's probably not going to be a good point to start the sidewalk on Shaker, but Lander, Gates Mills, those are wider streets and they have wider areas. I think that would be doable. But thank you so much for all the information you provided.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. You.
I'll stand up so I can see everybody. Barbara Lowry, 28425 Shaker Boulevard. We've been a resident for 30 years. And I am in opposition to the sidewalks for a lot of the reasons that we've already brought up in terms of privacy and homeowner investment in their landscaping, the aesthetics of it, changing the entire characteristic of the community. I think that's a real selling feature of our community is that we don't have sidewalks. There is pride of ownership. I have two main issues. The one is that there have been several comments about people not wanting to move here because we don't have sidewalks. And I've heard that several times before, that it doesn't make us attractive, it doesn't make us competitive. I guess my question is, do we have any evidence to support that? Do we in fact have a lot of open housing stock that is unsold? Do we in fact have longer periods of time that our homes are on the market that are unsold? Do we in fact have information that our home ownership, the price of the homes is going down? I don't know that we have any of that evidence. My second comment is utilization. We talk about accessibility, we talk about who would have access to it. We don't know that. That's a big unknown. You're talking about who's going to utilize this. I think the survey was valuable. I think we had a 28% response rate, which means 72% of our communities, our residents did not weigh in. So I think we have a lot of valuable information about things that are important to our community, and I think that should be helpful. I appreciate all this give and take. I think that's really wonderful, and I like the comments about the infrastructure. Living on the north side of Shaker Boulevard, my front lawn has been dug up 3 times for water main breaks, for gas line breaks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Evan Cars, 28 Pepper Creek Drive. I guess I will be a rebuttal to your comment. We're neighbors, and I walk through your yard sometimes, and I guess you don't mind, but I'm not gonna walk in the street and have my kids in my car, so.
Thank you. Not gonna do it safe well.
Happy to. So 79% of the people in the city want sidewalks on major roads. That's the math. It was taken as showing 74% overall on major roads, but if you consider all the people that don't live on major roads, it's 79%. The issue is that 63% of the people that would be impacted because their houses would become accessible are voting it down, and 5% of that group doesn't realize they live on major roads because they said they don't want sidewalks on their streets, but they do want them on major roads. So figure that one out. So the issue here is, one, you mentioned you don't have proof. I live on Pepper Creek Drive. My house is worth $100,000 more than your house. If it was exactly the same, and you still have a better lot because Shaker has better land because it was developed first. I would have never purchased a house on Shaker Boulevard because of the traffic and not being able to walk with my kids on a sidewalk. All of us that live on Creekside or Pepper Creek or those other streets, we paid a premium, or in Landwood Wood, we paid a premium to be able to walk on our street. It's not safe to walk on Shaker. We either have to walk through people's yards and their landscaping that they chose to build in the public right of way, or we have to walk in the street. Before Shaker was under construction, we would see people pushing wheelchairs, walking dogs in the road. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But listening to this discussion, Dave, where almost everyone in the council was either in the medical profession or the legal profession, I was surprised there's very little discussion about the health benefits of getting out for a walk every so often, particularly for people that are trapped in their house because they live on a major road. And similarly, when you have data saying that almost 80% of the population wants sidewalks, if the council were to choose to not build sidewalks, is there a legal liability for either the city or the council members that vote against it? Because if someone were to be hit by a car on a major road when the residents voted and said that they wanted sidewalks to still not move forward, you have a problem there. I'm not sure, but one suggestion, given that this is a polarizing discussion, is you could have people snap if they agree or don't agree, so you could reduce the number of comments similar to how you were kind of trying to have people not repeat. And I would love a splash pad. I have young kids, not judging by everyone's appearance of likely age. You may not have young kids at this point, but at some point you did. And the splash pad's pretty awesome. They didn't exist 30 years ago, but they're a lot of fun, and it would be great to fit somewhere in one of our parks.
Well, we're not going to be doing that apparently, at least this year.
That's why I came. I heard
All right.
via the text chain that it was voted down, and not really sure how it happened so quickly, but there aren't a lot of people that don't like splash pads except apparently here.
Thank you. Jean?
Hi, I'm Jean Gascoigne, 30496 West Landerwood. I just want to understand one thing, the ADA, what, somebody said something about building ADA compliance of the sidewalks. What, did somebody say something about it? Please.
Yeah,
It's
I-
American for Disability
Yeah,
Act.
I just asked Don,
That's,
the width, why
Yeah, why
5 feet and
Yeah.
and what's
Yeah,
88?
you build a sidewalk in the public right of way. If you have the space,
I know what it is.
it needs to be 5 feet, would be the minimum width.
So it will be in compliance.
Right, you want to build it to the minimum standard, which would be the 5 feet.
Good.
But before you said it wasn't compliant.
I don't understand what
So
you're saying.
I just thought, I misheard you, but before I thought you said 5 feet wouldn't be compliant, but it is. Okay, good.
Five feet is compliant, yes,
Okay,
just to be clear.
that's what I was asking.
I guess knowing how each member feels, yes or no, about the sidewalks, I don't see how that is important to us, for you to do your work. And then lastly, the splash parks. Somebody every 6 hours would need to test the water.
Thank you.
I mean, it's in there, it's
Ma'am, you had
required,
something?
so that's all.
Did you have your hand up?
I did. I was just gonna quickly add more support for a path.
You have to say your name and
Oh,
your
I'm
address,
sorry.
please.
Deanna Campbell, 31749 South Woodland Road. So I'll give a perspective of someone who lives on a major road that, I would be thrilled to have a pathway in my front yard. People walk through the front yard anyways, walking their dogs and kids riding their bikes. My daughter was hit, as Michelle mentioned, riding her bike on South Woodland Road by a car a couple years ago. And so safety is my number one concern. I think sidewalks would make our community a lot safer. I think that they could be an asset. They could make our community walkable. Community members would get out and meet each other on the sidewalk. I see Orange residents using their pathway, and I'm jealous of their pathway. I think that there's a lot of communities and movement for greenways and connecting communities and people and encouraging physical activity and people to get out and walk. So I'm 100% in support of sidewalks. I hope we don't get bogged down in the details and have that either, we don't move forward with the discussion because we're so worried about the details at this point. I'm hoping that the council can move forward with discussing and having some plans laid out so that, you're really talking about moving forward with the sidewalks.
Thank you very much.
That's my opinion.
In the back.
Tamara Rennick, 31350 South Woodland. I just want to be clear about the results of the survey. 27% of the people that voted of the community voted in the survey. It's a mischaracterization to say that 74% or 78%, I believe this gentleman down here said, were in favor of sidewalks. There were 74% of the 27% that were in favor of sidewalks. That equals 20% of the community. So it's not 80% of the people who are in favor of the sidewalks. There's open discussion on both sides, and I'm glad we're finally having this discussion. But as a resident of South Woodland, it's interesting to me to hear all the people that don't actually live on the streets that are going to be affected wanting the sidewalks, and the majority of the people who live on the streets that are going to be affected not wanting the sidewalks. This is going to tear up our front lawns. from the setbacks that I read today, which, thank you, Mr. Sheedy, for finally providing this information, they're gonna be a third of the way up my yard, peeking into my house. I enjoy my privacy, and I enjoy, you know, the landscape and the structure and the design of the city the way it is. That's why I moved here 23 years ago. I don't want to see anybody getting hurt. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want a child getting hurt in the street, but I think that overall, you're looking at chopping up residential space, you know, for sidewalks that I don't know what percentage of the city is gonna use that. You know, is it a cost-effective solution? And I know in previous meetings, they've mentioned that sidewalks already exist in the community. I took the time to drive around, and I noticed that most of them are in front of businesses or country clubs. They're not in residential or surrounding like Sterling Lakes. They're not in the city. So this will be the first time that you will be taking land away from people that live on those streets and subjecting them to potentially, especially if it's that far into my yard, an eyesore and a maintenance issue.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Just as a point of clarification for everyone in the audience, because you've heard, you know, percentages tossed here, 70 whatever percent, 27% or 74% of the 20s, just so that everyone's on a common factual basis. The representatives of the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, the experts that we retained for the survey, said there was a margin of error plus or minus of 1% of their results as they projected over the broader population, just so everyone understands how the numbers work. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you, Council. My name is Stella Jack. I'm at 28350 Shaker Boulevard. My partner and I are in opposition to the sidewalks, although I will say, having heard both sides, I'm very sympathetic to the young families that have moved here with children who want a safe place to walk with their children. I've seen those people walk in our front yard because I work from home and I look out Shaker Boulevard every day. So I can appreciate, I'm happy to have them walk in the yard. I'd rather have them walk in our yard than on the street, frankly, but we are just not interested in having a sidewalk impede on our property line and what the city owns. We're concerned as well about the safety issue. There's many articles in the police beat of the Sun newspaper about, you know, criminals who take advantage of, you know, walking up sidewalks, walking up driveways to get into people's houses. So I would love for council to look at that aspect of having sidewalks. I would also be interested to find out what impact to the value of our homes would be after having sidewalks installed. We really appreciate and love the country aesthetic of this community. It gives us great pleasure to pull in the driveway of our beautiful home because we just love the landscaping and the privacy of it. And I'm just very concerned to have that interrupted.
Thank you.
By the sidewalk.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Yes, sir.
Ron Barber, 33,000 Shaker Boulevard. Obviously, it's a very polarizing topic, and I can see both sides, actually. You know, I understand if you have kids, you want to be safer, if you feel it's safer to have sidewalks, things of that sort. Also want to just make a comment on the council people. All 7, I think, are phenomenal. The things that you bring up, the discussions you have are excellent. Every one of you look into these topics and ask the hard questions. I think that is phenomenal. This is only my second, in 19 years, only my second council meeting. So shame on me, I should get to more. One comment though on the survey. I think you have to be very careful in what you read into that survey. So that survey is 11 pages long. There were 4 basic questions regarding sidewalks. One of them was, if there are sidewalks, would you use them? I don't want sidewalks. If there are sidewalks, I'm using them. But that doesn't mean I want sidewalks. A lot of great points. I am not going to go over what everybody else said, but I moved here because there weren't sidewalks. And I like the aesthetics of Pepper Pike, and I think that sets us apart from most other cities. The other thing too is for those of you who do live on main streets, in my situation, it would be roughly 1,750 square feet of my lawn that you'd be taking away for the sidewalks. I don't think that's fair to me. I don't think it's fair to the other people on major streets.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Back in the corner.
Peg Herrenick, 29300 Shaker Boulevard. I talked to just 3 people, and I know that's not a lot, but 2 of them were elderly. They did not know about the survey. They do not have computers, nothing. Is there a way that you could get a mailing out to the people on the streets that will be affected by the sidewalk issue and say yes or no? You want the sidewalk, you don't want the sidewalk. I think the survey was good, but I think there were too many ways to read into it. Like they said, yes, we want sidewalks, but not in my backyard. Well, how do you read that? Is that a yes vote or no vote? So
Okay.
is there some way that mailings could be sent out? And just make it simple, cut sidewalks. Don't do it that way.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there someone in the back there?
Yes, Paul Volpe, 32900 Sugar Boulevard. Me and my wife moved here, we plan on having kids. We're opposed to sidewalks only because we don't want people walking up to our house. I grew up in University Heights, and it was a pain in the butt just to shovel the sidewalks, but that's because we have kids going to school. Since we have buses here, honestly, that's a good point. But my question is, I support the walkway on the Gates Mills Boulevard because that's on the median, that's not in our yards, it's not impeding us. And if you do something like Beechwood did with their Shaker Boulevard park, I can see that being very useful to getting all the kids out, riding around at a safe place. But just on these main streets in my yard, I'm opposed to that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Bart?
Yeah, Gerard Bartasavage, 29600 Shaker Boulevard. You've heard me so many times before, it feels sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again for the record. And Pepper Pike is surrounded by communities that have all addressed walkability. Beechwood, Orange, and Mayfield. They all have beautiful new areas to walk, jog, and bike. You know, why is Pepper Pike lagging behind? The values of homes, it's already been in the survey, values of homes go up when we have sidewalks. The crime is not an issue. It's actually beneficial when people are actually walking on sidewalks. There are 3 surveys that went out, 3 surveys, and it appears that it's almost like it's kicking it down the road. We've even done, Michelle and I were administrators of their friends of Pepper Pike neighbors. We had a mini survey out there. Majority of people are for sidewalks. My wife and I live on Shaker. We constantly walk, and sometimes we have to walk on people's yards. Sometimes it's wet. And we see people every day sitting in my office looking over Shaker Boulevard, people walking on Shaker Boulevard. It's unsafe. It's a narrow road. So, I suggest you come out on Shaker Boulevard. And biker cars, watch the traffic, watch the people traffic on Shaker Boulevard. It's terrible, and they really need a place to walk. I've talked to some of our neighbors, and one of my neighbors was here. He had to leave on business. But many of the people that moved to Pepper Pike, like my wife here and I, we bought our homes because of the value of the homes, the community, and the schools. We didn't realize what was missing until after we moved in, just like some of our neighbors have said. You know what? We love our home, we love the community, but you know what's missing? Sidewalks. It's unfair for kids, to parents to have to load up the SUV, the bikes, the kids, and go to a park to walk, jog, or ride their bikes. we'd like to see some progress. I'd like to see some progress. As some people said, we have a discussion, it's a good discussion, but where is this going? I mean, are we gonna have another council meeting next month to talk about it? Perhaps we should have some meetings before council meetings to discuss some of these issues so we can keep it moving instead of breaking it up to every month, and then someone has an issue and it's broken up another month, it kicks it down the road. So again, I and my wife Erin, and my neighbor that had to leave, we are for sidewalks, and we would really like to know what we can do to help the progress. And I talked to Scott Newell today, had a really nice conversation. And
Bart, I'm gonna have to ask you to sort of wrap up.
Okay, I'm done. Yeah, just one more thing. I talked to him and I said, I believe I'm gonna take a survey on Shaker Boulevard and see where everybody stands and bring it to council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. In the back row, Miss.
Grace Barber, 33,000 Shaker Boulevard. I'm just curious with, so many people wanting sidewalks, so many not wanting sidewalks, why it isn't put out to vote for the residents of Pepper Pike, so you get a clean cut idea of who wants it and who doesn't. I think that, a survey really isn't a vote. And if people knew the importance of that survey, maybe more people would have taken time out to fill it out and complete it. But we bought out here because of the beauty of it. When you drive through the streets, you're looking at green on the side of the streets. You're not looking at sidewalks. You drive through Beechwood, there's streets, the sidewalks are parallel to the streets. I mean, it's an eyesore when they have different color sidewalks. It's not the beauty, it's not the unique Park Lake City that people bought in Pepper Pike for. I get it, you have kids, but you have to make decisions when you are buying, maybe you bought for the school, but you shouldn't put your ideas on other residents or the burdens, like on some of these main streets. If someone's gonna take so much of their land taken up, especially after they're on corners on both sides of their property. Is that fair for me to impose what I want on someone else's burden? Like, I would walk Shaker Boulevard, but I'd like to walk some of the streets, Pepper Creek or, or South Woodland, whatever. I'd like to walk the side streets. I don't just want to go straight down Shaker all the way to Lander and then over to the store. That's not where I want to walk. So is that fair to put the burden on certain residents and not others?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Are we concluded? I think so. Anyway, on behalf of council, thank you very much for all of your excellent comments this evening. We appreciate your coming out and sitting through a lengthy meeting.
Mayor, can we post this on the
will.
website too?
What?
Could we post this on the website?
Yeah, and we will be meeting again, and we stand adjourned.
Time to go to sleep.